Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm back. How are you? I've missed you all. It's really great to be back. I'm sorry that I've been away for so long. I am going to blame lockdown. It's true. Lockdown has been very difficult. Yeah, really difficult actually. We've been really struggling. To kind of get through it day by day. It's been like 150 days now, with the kids at home. Uh, Becky and I are exhausted. The kids are exhausted, and yeah, there's no school, there's no nursery, but there's something about being trapped at home day after day after day that's kind of even more exhausting than going out and doing stuff every day. Psychologically exhausting. So yeah, I've been finding it hard. It's been a real struggle. Been feeling quite low, and haven't really felt up to kind of to being here. Um, I know a lot of you will be in the same position. Things are still really weird out there, and I know there's moments of hope, but it still feels quite bleak at times. And just the thought of this going on and on and on and on. I hope you're not feeling too miserable and depressed. And whatever you're doing, I know some of you will be back at school now. Some of you maybe back at work. A lot of you won't be at school, won't be at work. And yeah, maybe a lot of you will be feeling pretty low about it all. Not being able to do things that you normally get a chance to do. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to feel miserable about this. We've not really ever been in a situation like this before, a period of so much global change. And it is depressing, and it is exhausting, and it's okay to say that it's affecting you. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. We were saying why we feel bad for feeling so bad, but actually it's okay to feel bad. And I don't know anyone who doesn't feel that this is hard, even though some people are putting on a brave face. But yeah, I don't know anyone who isn't struggling at the moment. But there is hope, and it will. I have supreme confidence that it will get better. But yeah, it's hard, and yeah, I've been feeling pretty low. I've been keeping myself busy. I had a new book out. I've been trying to keep myself busy writing books. It's a new crime thriller for adults. It's part of my series that I've been running for a little while. I'll put a link to it below, just in case anyone is interested in crime. And yeah, just trying to keep myself busy and trying to keep like a consistent day to day with the kids to just to make it feel like things are okay. My kids are 8, 4 and 2. The 8-year-old has autism and ADHD, which is has its own set of unique challenges, especially in a lockdown situation when routines change. There's been a lot of tantrums, but they're young enough really to not really get the whole how bad this feels sometimes. So that's one blessing. But I know some of you will have kids, and I don't know, maybe your kids are finding it hard. But anyway, I just want to say that I hope you're doing okay, and that if you are feeling low, and that's okay. And just let's all try and keep that positivity going, because it's what we definitely need. But anyway, yeah. So I do want to, I did want to be back here. I've been thinking a lot about doing this, and I miss you all. And I really enjoyed kind of being with you during lockdown and reading these books. And I want to finish what we started, what feels like a million years ago, but it's only, when did we start? April, I think. April, May, June, July. Oh, yeah, like 4 months ago actually. I don't think I've been here for 2 months. So I did want to finish what we've started together, and get through this book here, Execution. So yeah, I'm gonna read Execution. It's a bit of a beast. I think it's the longest one in the series. I haven't read it for a while. But I'm really looking forward to reading it, because yeah, it's something really nice about this book, because it ties everything up. And hey, I won't say too much actually, because some of you won't have read it. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to start reading this. I'm going to attempt to do a summary of the whole series now, just to try and catch up to where we were before. So we begin a long time ago in lockdown, Escape from Furnace number 1. Alex Sawyer is a bully and a criminal. He's not a very nice guy. One day he breaks into a house with his best friend Toby. They think they're going to steal a few things. They think this house is empty. The house isn't empty. It's full of these giants in black suits and this horrible twisted figure with a gas mask on its face. And Alex's best friend Toby gets shot and killed. Alex gets framed for his murder and sent to Furnace Penitentiary. Furnace Penitentiary is the world's worst prison for young offenders. It's buried a mile beneath the ground. Once you're there until you die. And that doesn't take long because this prison is full of monsters. It's full of wheezers and gas masks. It's full of black suit guards. And it's got the warden. The warden is this horrible person who you can't really look in the eye because there's something weird and supernatural about him, and he runs this kind of hideous, horrible prison. Oh, by the way, Floyd is still here. You can't really see him over my... Oh, there he is. He's where's my hand? He's there. I had to borrow the stand that he was on for something else. So sorry, Floyd. I've basically just decapitated him, which is kind of what you want to do with the Weezer anyway, isn't it? Because they're evil. But anyway, so Alex Sawyer gets sent to lockdown for life without parole. Here, he gets sent with a guy called Z, who quickly becomes his friend. He also meets a guy called Donovan, who becomes his cellmate. Alex, Z, and Donovan decide pretty early on that they are going to try and break out of this prison. And Alex and Donovan come up with a plan where they are going to fill the rubber gloves from the kitchen with gas and blow their way out into an underground river that they think is beneath the prison. So they put this plan into action, and they basically blow their way out of Furnace in this kind of firestorm of violence. And so it's Alex, Donovan. Oh no, Donovan gets taken the night before they go, which means he doesn't get to join them, and Alex promises he'll come back for him. But so Alex and Z, a really horrible guy called Gary, and another guy called Toby, a different Toby, manage to blow their way out of the prison and escape into the river beneath Furnace. Toby dies. Sorry, Toby. Anyway, they get recaptured very swiftly by the warden, and they get put in solitary confinement. Alex and Z get put in solitary confinement, and down there they meet another guy called Simon, who's been living in the tunnels around the prison for a long time. He's kind of got this great big arm on one side, a skinny arm on the other, and he is basically being partially experimented on by the warden. Simon thinks there's a way out of Furnace. He needs Alex and Z to help him, so they basically try and find a way outside of out of solitary confinement. On the way, they discover that Donovan is in the infirmary and he's been experimented on by the warden, and he's kind of losing his mind very quickly. He's got these great big muscles, even bigger than ones he usually had, underneath his skin. He's in a really bad place. They realise that there is a way to escape up a section of rock outside of the prison. They try to do this. It fails, so they come up with a plan to escape the prison incinerator, up the chimney that leads to the surface. As they do that, Alex realises that it's too late to save Donovan. Sorry, Donovan. And he kills Donovan to put him out of his misery and stop him from becoming one of the warden's pets. They try to climb the tunnel and they fall to not their deaths. They fall to their injuries. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, so the warden recaptures them again. Now we're in death sentence. The warden starts to experiment on Alex. Starts to turn him into a black suit, basically stripping out everything that's him, physically and mentally, and putting him full of muscles and injecting him with an injector, which kind of turns him into this kind of feral, angry creature. And he starts to turn his mind into that of a black suit, making him think that he deserves the world, and that he deserves to be a supreme kind of creature. So Alex starts to turn into a black suit. He very nearly loses himself. His last challenge, however, is that the warden asks him to kill Z, and he can't do it. He can't bring himself to do it because there's a part of him that's left inside his head. So instead, he punches the warden in the face. I love that scene. And Z basically kicks the warden in the head, and they escape. And they manage to escape solitary confinement. As they do, they realise that Gary is turning into this even bigger creature. He's like the massive berserker. They set Gary loose. Gary starts killing black suits. They manage to escape into general population inside the prison, and they start a riot. And everyone's like throwing fire bombs, and they manage to block the doors so the warden can't bring his army up. And the prisoners are now in charge of the prison. And because the warden can't get his army up, Alfred Furnace, the guy who built Furnace, we don't know much about him yet. He sends 2 berserkers to basically kill everyone in the prison, to wipe out all the evidence of the escape. And so these berserkers come. Alex realises that in order to beat these berserkers, he is going to have to inject himself with more nectar. He is so close to the edge that this could be the final push that pushes him into being one of the warden's creatures. But he does it anyway. He basically kicks these monsters' butts, and they escape out of the prison. And Alex, by now, is teetering on the edge of insanity. They climb the elevator shaft, and we into fugitives. They are in the city. They think it's going to be a very easy plan now just to escape and leave the prison behind them. However, what they didn't realise is that Alfred Furnace has just loosed a load of berserkers onto the city. He's basically got a bigger plan than just the prison. He is wanting something else, some kind of world-ending vision. So they fight their way through the city. They meet a girl called Lucy. They start trying to escape the city with Lucy. Alex keeps having visions of Alfred Furness, this monster on top of a tower block in the city. And as they go through this process of trying to escape the city, including going into a church where they're almost sacrificed, Alex realizes that if he leaves the city, then Alfred Furness is going to win. He's gonna take over the world. So instead, he thinks what he has to do is he has to try and kill Alfred Furness to stop this from happening. So he makes a plan to go to the tower block to face Alfred Furness. He sends Lucy and Z, I think it's Lucy's plan, to go and tell the army to destroy the tower if they don't hear from Alex. So Alex gets to the tower. He thinks he's going to find Alfred Furness in the tower, and he's going to have to fight Alfred Furness. And they also have burgers in honour of Donovan. Oh, Donovan. And before this happens, and anyway, he goes to the tower. He doesn't find Furness there. He finds the warden. The warden is there with the berserker. It's a new kind of berserker using a new kind of nectar. This is something they found in the city, that there's a new kind of nectar that's more powerful than the old kind of nectar. And basically the warden kills this berserker, drinks his blood, and he basically becomes a tank that is designed for one purpose, which is killing Alex. And Alex almost loses this battle at the end of Fugitives, and ultimately, in order to win it, he basically slices the warden open, drinks the warden's blood. Of course, the warden's blood is basically just come from the berserker. So this blood has flowed right up from the berserker into Alex. It turns Alex into like a mega berserker, and but he kills the warden, and as the warden is dying, he throws him to the Weezers. The Weezers tear the warden to pieces, and Alex by now is gone. His mind has been frazzled by this new nectar, so he climbs right to the top of the tower. By the way, the tower is being assaulted by now by aircraft. It's been blown into smithereens by the Air Force, and he gets to the top of the tower and he realizes that the creature he saw in the vision, the visions he's been having, was actually him. It wasn't Alfred Furness at all. He was seeing himself, and he kind of loses his mind, and all he can think about up there is that he is so angry with what has happened to him that he is going to destroy the world. Is that everything? Oh my god, that was a long summary. Which brings us to execution. We join Alex on top of the tower block. So I do look like I've just been a castaway on a tropical island somewhere. Okay, we're about to have another summary. I forgot that I always do this at the beginning of the book, so sorry about that. The boy. I once knew a boy. His name was Alex Sawyer. He was the boy who stared back at me from the mirror. A kid like any other. Not bad looking, a little scrawny. You wouldn't have looked twice if you'd seen him on the street. That boy. He's dead now. I let him die. But I want to tell you his story. I need to tell you his story. I don't remember much of Alex's, of my life before Furness. It's a blur of faceless people and half-formed faces. He had a family once, I think, a mum and a dad, and friends too, but he wasn't a good kid. I remember that much at least. He was a bully and a thief. He took from the ones he loved, and all he gave in return was grief. I can't even remember how it all started, only that he wanted things like shoes, a bike, a computer. That's what I find hardest to believe about all this. Not the truth about Furness or the monsters spawned inside the prison, but that Alex's life was destroyed because he was so desperate to get a new pair of sneakers. Bullying in the playground, stealing the odd fiver at lunchtime, it wasn't enough. Alex and his best friend Toby started burgling houses, stealing cash and valuables every chance they could. One day they broke into a place they thought was empty. It wasn't. They were caught by silver-eyed giants in black suits and a shriveled figure with a gas mask stitched into its face. Toby was shot and Alex was framed for his murder, sentenced to life without possibility of parole in Furness Penitentiary. Furness. The prison. I've been out for less than 24 hours, but already my memories from inside are fading. Buried a mile beneath the ground, nothing but rock in every direction. It was a place that society put children they no longer wanted, where even their parents would forget them. It was a place where kids like Alex were buried alive. But it was something so much worse than that too. The gas-masked wheezers stalked the cells, dragging inmates into the blood-drenched tunnels beneath the prison. Deformed creatures emerged in the dead of night, tearing their victims to pieces. And watching over it all was Warden Cross, a man as cruel and as dangerous as the devil himself. A man whose eyes were so full of madness, of hatred, of rancid glee, that meeting them was like watching yourself die 1,000,000 times over. Together with friends, Donovan and Z, Alex made a plan to get out, smuggling gas-filled gloves from the kitchen and blowing a hole in the floor, jumping into an underground river. They did what nobody else had ever managed. They found a way out of Furnace. But that river only carried them as far as the tunnels below and the unthinkable horrors of solitary confinement. It was here that not me, that Alex discovered the truth about Furnace. The prisoners were being turned into monsters, their minds and bodies broken and stitched back together into something new, something awful. Under the ever watchful evil gaze of the warden, those kids were pumped full of a dark, gold-flecked fluid known as nectar. It primed their bodies, made them stronger than they could ever have been naturally, able to withstand any injury. Then the wheezers opened them up, packing them full of muscle, giving them eyes of silver and setting them loose upon the world. The lucky ones died on the operating table. Others became black suits, the hulking guards who remembered nothing of the children they once were, who craved only more and more power. Some found themselves broken beyond repair, losing their minds completely to become rats, feral killing machines that roamed the tunnels beneath Furnace, butchering anyone they encountered. And some became something worse still. Their genes evolved, making them bigger, faster, stronger than nature ever intended. Beasts of unimaginable fury that looked more alien than human. The Berserkers. Alex and Z were rescued from solitary by a boy called Simon, a kid who'd been half turned by the warden's surgery, his torso and one arm now that of a black suit, his eyes silver. And we had made a break for freedom, trying to climb the shaft of the prison incinerator. But they were found. They were recaptured, and this time the warden wasted no time putting Alex under the knife. I don't remember the pain, only the strength it brought. My body, it was cut apart and put back together. It was improved. I was no longer Alex. I was something better, something more. The warden filled my head with promises of power, told me of the war that was about to come between the strong and the weak, between the monsters and the humans. He spoke of the new fatherland that would rise from the ashes of the old world. I almost forgot who I was. I almost became one of the warden's children, a soldier of Furnace. And it was then that I first heard Alfred Furnace himself, the mysterious force behind all of this madness. Furnace didn't live within the prison, but his dark presence filled every single one of the creatures who dwelled here. It gripped their every thought, determined their actions. He was their commander, their god, and his power was absolute. But some part of me resisted him, remembering my name, remembering my old life. Z, Simon and I, we fought our way back to general population, to the main body of the prison, and together with the inmates, we cracked the gates. We busted out of Furnace. We thought we'd made it. We thought we were free. But the prison break was just what Alfred Furnace wanted. His forces were waiting in the shadows, an army of black suits and berserkers, and with the city distracted by the escaping prisoners, he made his move. He began his war on humanity. He had a secret weapon too, a new strain of nectar, a red-flecked poison that spread like a plague. Any child who was bitten, who was filled with this improved nectar, became a super rat, driven by fury and intent on nothing but slaughter. Within hours of the break, the city fell as the new breed of rats ran riot. The army was called in, a state of emergency was declared, but it was too late. Furnace's nightmare force was unstoppable. And my role in this? I'm not sure I know. I was bitten by a berserker shortly after we escaped, my blood tainted by the new nectar. But it was a small bite, not enough to turn me into one of them. After that I had visions in my head, visions that came from Furnace himself, channelled into my mind through the nectar. He showed me a tower, a skyscraper on which a creature sat and howled at the world below. I thought it was him. I thought that beast was Furnace. I knew I had to try to kill him. I made a plan with Simon, Z and Lucy, a girl we'd met in the city. Z and Lucy went off to find the army, to tell them to destroy the tower. Simon and I went after Furness. I didn't find him there. I found the warden. He filled himself with a new nectar, becoming more powerful than any human had the right to be. Then we fought, both of us almost dying. The only way I survived was by drinking the blood from his veins, draining him of the new nectar. It saved my life, but it cost me the last of my sanity. I killed the warden, fed him to his own ghastly creations, but in doing so I became something worse. Because that's what Furness wanted too. The warden had failed him, and he needed a new general. He wanted me to become his right-hand man. Warden Cross may have lost, but Alfred Furness had won. I climbed to the roof of the tower, now engulfed with flames, as military jets bombarded it with missiles. I perched on the spire, and I saw the city crumbling beneath me. Then I screamed, realising that the creature I'd seen in my vision wasn't Furness at all. It was me. It's no wonder I didn't recognise myself. I had lost both of my hands, my right arm turned into a blade of obsidian flesh, my left blown off at the elbow by a grenade. My body had been changed by the new nectar. I was taller than ever before, stronger too, but it was more than that. Furness's poison surged through my mind as well, stripping away the last of my memories, the last scraps of the boy I used to be. I made a promise, right there on that tower. I would find Alfred Furness, and I would kill him. And if the world stood in my way, then God help it, because I would tear it apart. I would watch it burn. Nothing would stop me from having my revenge. That boy, that kid called Alex Sawyer, he wouldn't have wanted this, but he no longer has a say. He's dead. I need to tell you a story, though. I need to tell you how it ends, because it's the only chance I have of bringing him back. Hang on, let me just make sure that's... Yes, ignore the screaming below, sorry. Okay. Pretend they're wheezers. Hooked. The gates of hell had opened. Monsters stalked the streets, beasts of unimaginable fury who turned life to death. And I was their new prince. I sat on my burning throne and watched as anger devoured the world. Perched on the spire of that tower, I saw the horror spill across the smoking ground, gripping the city in a fist of molten rage. Ranks of black suits trod the bones of soldiers into the tarmac, too fast and too powerful for those poor mortals in camouflage. I saw their victims flee into the alleyways, only to find far worse things there, nightmares made flesh. Beasts that had once been children, but which now stalked the shadows with hatred in their blood and murder in their eyes. And more creatures howled from the rooftops, beasts of impossible size and strength, their bodies warped and their minds broken. The berserkers earned their name well, pouncing on these terrified humans like demons greeting the damned at the gates of the underworld, rending, tearing, devouring. It was an army the likes of which the world had never seen, and commanding it was a man whose laughter rang in my ears, a man whose dark presence drove every single one of the freaks below, a man whose vision of the world was nothing but fury. Alfred Furness. He was the person I had come here to kill, the creature I thought I'd seen in my visions, a beast who sat on the peak of his kingdom and watched the old world purged by the new dawn. But that creature hadn't been Furness. It had been me, changed beyond recognition by the battles that had torn me apart and the nectar that patched me back together. I understood now why I'd had to come here, why I'd had to fight the warden, why I'd had to change. Because it was the only way I could ever hope to beat Furness. Far below, something exploded, the detonation causing the entire roof of the building to shake. The enormous radio antenna fixed to the peak of the tower snapped free, and with a whip crack, slicing through the air as it cartwheeled earthward, vanishing into a pillar of smoke. There was a second blast, followed by a third, louder than the first two put together, and this time a section of the spire caved inwards, swallowed up by an inferno that raged just under the roof. I backed off to the edge, trying to snatch in clean air, trying to work out a way to escape. But there was none. The spire was circled by a wall of fire, hot enough to melt the reinforced steel skeleton of the tower. The skyscrapers around me were too far away to reach, even with my newfound strength and speed. There was only one way out, and although I had the nectar inside me, the new nectar, 1,000,000 times more powerful than the old, I wouldn't survive a 50-story fall. No way. Panic was beginning to claw its way through the rush, the sting of the fire on my warped skin making it all too clear how painful it would be to die up here. I used what remained of my left arm, the short blade that jutted from my elbow, still growing as the nectar worked on it, to wave the smoke away from my face, the sword-like right to feel my way along the sloped side of the spire. The jets that had attacked the tower were long gone, their job done. There were other things in the sky, though, black helicopters that hovered like falcons, shaded windshields all facing this way, watching as I was condemned to the flames. It brought back a distant memory of standing in front of a jury, being judged guilty of a crime I didn't commit, and sentenced to a living death. It was another life, another person's life. I wasn't that boy any longer. I was something so much more. I stood, ignoring the vertigo that made the city spin beneath me, and I held up the blade of my right hand, spitting out another choked roar of hatred. "You can't kill me!" I screamed when my breath had recovered, knowing that nobody in the helicopters would be able to hear me. "I won't let you!" Another explosion, this time out in the city. Black smoke churned upwards from a gas station, so dark and so dense that it looked like a granite mountain pushing its way out of the earth. 2 of the choppers broke away, banking gracefully. I caught a glimpse of shadowed faces behind the tinted glass, and through the open door of one of the birds was a cannon. They continued to rise, heading this way, heading for me. I backed off, using the smoke from the tower to shield myself. But as I did so, I heard that voice in my mind, a whisper that it was at the same time was a shout, louder even than the howl of the wind and the thunder of the flames. "Let them take you," said Alfred Furness, speaking through the nectar. I slapped my ruined left arm against my head, trying to knock his tainted voice away. He'd had his filthy fingers inside my skull right from the start, from the moment we first made our break from the tunnels beneath the prison, taunting me, manipulating me, controlling me with the ease of a puppet master pulling the strings of a marionette. I still didn't know why he'd taken such an interest in me, why he'd led me to the tower just to fight the warden, why he'd given me those last vital words of encouragement that had enabled me to defeat his general, and why he wanted me to stand at his right hand as he ushered in his new kingdom. It didn't make any sense. "No," I growled, speaking to him this time. "I won't listen to you. I'm going to find you and end you." "You're going to die," the voice replied, a bone-rattling hiss, "and all our work will be for nothing. Let them take you, and I promise you will find answers to the last of your questions." The 2 choppers were approaching fast. They reached the level of the tower and held their position 20 metres or so away from me, their blades causing the smoke to dance in sweeping, majestic plumes. I wondered what I looked like to the people inside. More nightmare than human. 2 asymmetric, jagged blades for arms and eyes like churning vortexes. I knew the terror that my new body must have inspired, and it made me feel good. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I could crush those soldiers, all of them, and take control of the world. I could hear Furness's laughter. But even the knowledge that I was acting the way he wanted me to... Sorry, that noise I made just made me laugh. I could hear Furness's laughter, but even the knowledge that I was acting the way he wanted me to didn't dull the sharp edge of excitement that wormed through my thoughts. One of the choppers swung around, the open side hatch facing me. Through the burning air it took on a shimmering, surreal quality, but I could still make out the machine gun inside, pointing right this way. "Come on!" I bellowed. I'd been shot before and survived. There was nothing they could do that could kill me. Let them try, and I'd show them what true power was. "Come on!" By the time the cannon opened fire, I was already on the move, throwing myself further up the spire, a cloak of smoke draped over me. I waited for the hammer of bullets against the roof, the storm of shrapnel, but all I heard was a dull clunk. I turned as the chopper was rising again, using its rotors to blow away my cover, and I was just in time to see the gunner cut loose a rope and load in another. It wasn't a cannon at all. It was a grappling gun. A harpoon. He fired, catching me off guard. I tried to jump out of the way, but a sliver of steel punched through my gut, dragging a black rope after it. It pinged off the concrete spire, opening like an umbrella. Whoosh! I grabbed at the rope, but with blades for hands I couldn't get purchase. The grappling hook that had sliced through me slammed into my back, the prongs holding it there, and before I even knew what was happening, I was wrenched off the tower. The universe came apart, the sky and the ground becoming one endless blur as I spun through the air, my stomach lurching so hard that for a second I thought it had left my body completely. I realised I was screaming, or at least as much of a scream as my air-starved lungs could manage. Then the line went taut, the grappling claw fixed into my flesh, and I swung beneath that chopper like a fish on a hook. They began to reel me in, and I was powerless to stop them. The only thing I could do was try to cut the line, but that would mean falling to my death. The other chopper was too far away to reach, arcing away as I watched, heading for the ground. The bird above me did the same. The world tilting sickeningly once again as we plummeted earthwards. The tower flashed by beside me, every window hemorrhaging smoke, massive craters in its side where the missiles had hit, the entire building groaning like a mythical beast brought down by spears and arrows. I'd wait. I'd bide my time until they pulled me close enough. Then I'd strike, too fast and too strong for them to stop me. I ran my eyes up the black cord that rose from my stomach, then focused on the bottom of the chopper, the bird getting bigger as I drew close. I'd be there in seconds. A shape appeared from the hatch, a soldier leaning out over me, a harness holding him in place. He had a gun in his hands, and he aimed down the sights for no more than a second before pulling the trigger. Something thudded into my arm, no more painful than a nettle sting. I glanced at it, a growl already spilling from between my lips. It wasn't a bullet. It looked more like a feather, a red plume sticking out just below my shoulder. The soldier fired again and again, a crimson forest sprouting over my torso and my neck. Smoke began to cloud my vision, except I knew it wasn't smoke. It wasn't nectar either. It was something else, a creeping darkness that cut off the relentless glow of the sun, that blotted out the city, that left only the grinning face of the soldier as he was pulled back inside the helicopter. "Let them take you." Furness's voice again, and even this was muted by the unbelievable, inescapable tiredness that had settled into my thoughts, into my bones. "You will have your chance for revenge. I promise you that." Then the last scraps of daylight sputtered out like candles, and the world was no more. Oh dear. Okay, we'll do one more. Watching. And I bet you were pleased to see that I still can't actually read a book. Watching. My dreams led me to a place of infinite quiet. I stood in a forest. Oh yeah, I've just remembered all this bit. Completely forgotten about the orchard. Anyway, sorry. Watching. My dreams led me to a place of infinite quiet. I stood in a forest, nothing but trees in every direction. Their gnarled trunks grew into finger-like branches that twisted and entwined overhead, so many of them that they almost blotted out the twilight sky above. Only a sliver of cold moonlight made it through, and by its silver touch I saw piles of rotting fruit on the damp ground. Apples. Thousands of them. Black-eyed crows picking at them as if they were corpses, worms wriggling through the decomposing flesh. Not a forest, then. An orchard. I knew this place. I'd seen it before, not like this, but carved from stone. It was the orchard that had been replicated at the top of Furness's tower block, the one I'd just been pulled from. Except back in that penthouse there had been a sculpture of a boy nailed to a trunk, The young Alfred Furness, his stomach cut open. I scanned the trees before me, stretching off like an army of skeletons, but I could see no sign of him. I tried to turn around, but my head was locked, my body paralysed, as so often happens in dreams. Panic rose from my stomach like vomit, but I forced myself to swallow it back down. It's only a dream, I told myself, even though I knew it was something more than that. The blanket of silence that cradled the orchard was so immense that it was almost a sound in its own right, a mute roar that I could feel against my ears as though I was deep underwater. The leafless branches swayed in the breeze, the birds fought and flapped between their feastings, but they made no noise. I couldn't even hear my own breath, or feel my pulse. It was the fire that alerted me to their presence. The deep, velvet shadows between the trees began to flicker gently, a ghostly dance of light and dark against the bark. Those forms gradually solidified into shapes that marched through the orchard, a procession of men and women all holding flaming torches. Their clothes were like something from an old movie, the sort of thing peasants might have worn hundreds of years ago. Their faces were contorted with emotion, maybe fear, maybe anger, maybe both. And they held those torches against the encroaching night as if they were the only thing that stood between them and the devil. They marched before me, from right to left, and it was only when they were directly in front of me that I noticed two other figures in the crowd. Both were being carried, one on a wooden board, a wreath on his motionless stomach, the other struggling and screaming between two hulking men, his hands and feet bound. I recognised the second kid immediately, even though his grief-filled face was the exact opposite of the calm expression worn by the carving in the penthouse. It was Alfred Furness, and he was no older than me. Several of the mob seemed to scour the area before settling on a large tree to my left. They ran towards it, planting their torches in the wet soil and ushering the rest of the group forwards. The two men threw Furness down and the boy tried to squirm away, burrowing into the ground as if he could tunnel his way to safety. One of the women used a knife to cut open the twine around his wrists and ankles, but before he could make a run for it, the men had hoisted him up again. They spun him around, and one of them lashed out, slapping him across the cheek. There was still no sound, but my imagination was happy to provide one. I wanted to step out, to try to stop what was happening. I knew the boy was Furness, but the way he cried for help, tears streaming down his filthy cheeks, his skinny arms held out towards a non-existent saviour. Those weren't the actions of a crazed psychopath. They were those of a terrified child. My body was still locked tight, however. I might as well have been one of the trees in the orchard, rooted to the ground and held fast by the branches of my brothers. The biggest of the men lifted the boy against the tree, pinning him there, while more of the crowd surged forward. Two women grabbed one of Furness's arms, bending it back around the trunk, while another put a huge iron nail against his palm. All I could do as they struck the first blow was to close my eyes. When I dared look again, I saw the crowd step back, leaving Furness suspended from the bark, crucified. He hung there in agony, his legs scrabbling for purchase, unable to find the ground, blood streaming down his arms, pattering on the crushed fruit of the orchard ground. The men and women gently laid the corpse of the other boy down between them and the tree. The dead boy was younger than Furness, maybe 9 or 10, but their faces were similar enough for me to know that they must have been brothers. One woman knelt by his side, howling into the boy's chest, and when she looked up at Alfred Furness, her expression was so warped it was almost inhuman. She hissed at him, the way a cat hisses at an enemy, and even though I couldn't hear her or understand the word her lips formed, the dream interpreted it for me. Murderer! The emotion in the crowd swelled, 24 people all shouting the same accusation. Somebody threw something at Furness, the missile bouncing off his shoulder and leaving a mushy stain there. Seconds later, the air was full of rotten fruit, a storm of apples that pelted the boy across every inch of his body. He sobbed, snivelled, begged, but his words were as silent to the crowd as they were to me. I don't know how long the assault went on. Time has no meaning in dreams, but when the men and women grew tired, the mountain of fruit was piled almost as high as the boy's feet. It had knocked the last of the fight from him, and he slumped motionlessly against the tree, his skin darkening with bruises. Only the lazy blinks of his eyes letting me know that he was still conscious. A man stepped forward, dressed in black and holding a leather-bound book. He placed a comforting hand on the woman's head as he addressed the young Alfred Furness. "You have committed a crime of unthinkable hatred and malice," he said, the words playing voicelessly in my head. "The slaying of thine own flesh and blood is the gravest sin, and you have been found guilty." The man opened the book, the Bible, I realised, and began to read. "Where is Abel, thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." The priest, if that's what he was, snapped the book shut. "And now thou art cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive..." Sorry, this voice, I can't do it. Sorry. "And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand." I could see the crowd murmuring, nodding their heads, some spitting onto the soil. The priest walked slowly to the tree, placing a finger under the boy's chin and lifting his head until their eyes met. "The Lord placed a mark on Cain to ensure he would not die, for his punishment was to wander the world, tormented by the knowledge of his sin. But you shall not be allowed to wander. Your fate lies here in this wood. Your punishment shall be death. Do you have anything more to say?" Alfred Furness opened his mouth, a worm of blood slithering over his chin. His face was swelling, his eyes watery blue pools in his head. Even in the time I'd spent in Furness, amongst those kids who cried and wailed and groaned every hour of every day, I had never seen somebody look so weak or so scared. His lips shaped a word, maybe 2 or 3, but I couldn't make them out. The priest let the boy's head drop and stepped away, holding his hands out to the crowd. "He makes no protest," he said. "Justice has been done. Let us leave him to the wolves." Seemingly satisfied, the crowd began to shuffle away, retreating into the woods with their torches. The last few to go carefully lifted the dead boy back onto their shoulders, disappearing between the trees until the only people to remain were Furness and the woman. She stood before him, her shoulders lurching up and down as she mourned. The boy somehow found the strength to look up at her, and once again he shaped those same words I could make no sense of. Her reaction was as shocking as it was brutal. She pulled a knife from the hem of her skirt, a wicked blade that caught the moonlight, and in a flash of silver and red, she dragged it across the boy's stomach, side to side. The boy looked down at the wound, more in shock than in pain, and when he spoke, I heard the word all too clearly. "Mother?" The woman threw the knife to the ground, staggering back as though she couldn't believe what she'd done. She crossed her fingers over her chest, then turned and bolted. As impossible as it was, the orchard seemed even quieter than it had to begin with, as still and as silent as if it was a photograph. Except I could see the blood gushing to the ground, the steam rising into the air. I could see the pulse in the boy's neck grow weaker. I don't know how he found the strength to do it, but he managed to lift his head once again, and this time he looked right at me. "I didn't do it," he said, the words crystal clear, even though I knew it wasn't my language he spoke. Those pale blue eyes caught the light from the remaining torches, burning with a raging fire, despite the fact he must have been right on the edge of death. I wanted to go to him, to hold out my hand to him, to cradle him, but it was hopeless. The only thing I could do was listen to his voiceless denials, to believe him. I could do that. I would do that. "I know," I said, the words only in my head, and I did know. The kid, Alfred Furness, was telling me the truth. He seemed to manage a smile, nothing more than a tremor of his thin blue lips. 2 final words tumbling out alongside his dying breaths. "Thank you." that was dark. I'd forgotten how horrible that was. Sorry if I ruined the dramatic tension there with my terrible voice. I don't know why I went with that voice. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been really, really lovely. It's made me feel better, actually, being up here and reading that book and getting back into it. I don't know why I left it so long. But I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to try and do it every day. And once we finish Furnace, maybe we'll move on to something else. Have a think about if there's any other of my books that you'd like me to read it, and let me know in the comments. Because we've got a few to choose from. I've got The Fury or The Devil's Engine, or I could go back and read The Inventors, which is my first ever book. It's very gentle and sweet. Or maybe something that hasn't been published. I mean, maybe I could go there. I don't know. A brand new story. I don't know. Anyway, this has been great. I really do hope you're all okay. I really appreciated all the comics you've been leaving. I do read them all. And yeah, it's been really lovely knowing you're out there. Stay safe, stay well, stay sane, and yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. See you then. Bye.